Hey everybody, it's James, otherwise known as Escape Punk Lefty, back here with another video within a day or two of the last one, surprisingly. I would love to upload every day or at least twice a week or something like that, but at the end of the day, I do not get paid to do this. I don't really have a following, and I do this just to have fun. Today, we're going to have a discussion about a very paradoxical and weird subject, or paradox and, just strange subject of anti-white racism. And most black leftists and even some liberals, especially if they're colored, will tell you to get the fuck out of their face when having a discussion about this. But like many people, like Tim Scott or Clarence Thomas, I'm one of the good ones. So we can have this discussion. So we need to talk about two things: people woking their way into segregationism, and then also people of color having racial biases against white people. We'll start with that one because I feel like that's an easier one to discuss. Now, can people of color have racial biases against white people? Very obviously that they can, and it's bad when they do. Because the thing about white supremacy is a social construct in a system that people should be fighting against, and people should not be, quote unquote, fighting against white people. Even though, ironically enough, most white supremacists are white people, but not all white people are white supremacists, and that includes even some conservative white people who might have, have some misunderstandings about, civil rights and, racial progressivism and, social justice. So, people can, in a way, view all white people as arbiters of white supremacy and not see that, at the end of the day, is, if you will, with this tongue in cheek irony, it's not all of them. And then we have the paradox of discussing, like, mostly liberal college campuses. What the heck is on my face, bro? My freaking mustache is sticking into my nose and stuff. Give me a second. Anyway. Sorry about that, folks. I had some technical difficulties with my facial hair. But we were discussing liberal colleges and the leftists in them sometimes overcorrecting or creating political, not political policies, but like policies at the schools or organizations or organizing in ways that might on the back end come off or wind up ironically being segregationist. And I feel like these things should be looked at as isolated incidents of people who are just overcorrecting and doing ignorant things to correct racism. Because you do have some white people out there that have a lot of white guilt, and instead of just doing the reading and understanding how white supremacy affects our society and how they can be better people to help alleviate some of these biases and stresses that people of color deal with. You do have a lot of white people who overcorrect and oversell, how woke they are, and they come up with policies that ironically are segregationist in nature. But I feel like, again, these incidents are very isolated and should not be taken as the rhetoric and the 100% viewpoint of all, racial justice movements. These are people that are, not only isolated from the mainstream, but they're isolated from, what, people of color want often of the time. This is white people doing this shit. And they're also isolated from at least the mainstream of black progressivism. Because you do have a lot of black people out there who want to just quote unquote live in a world or some type of enclave without white people, but those people are rare too. And I feel like a lot of the time people do have these ironically segregationist viewpoints are talked about way more in conservative media than they really have representation in in the social justice movement, if they can be thought of as social justice warriors at all. It kind of reminds me of how a lot of Nazis like Andy Warski back in the day during Gamergate and the right wing YouTube wave used to bring up Tariq Nasheed a lot. Tariq Nasheed is a homophobe, he's a sexist, and he's an anti-white racist. He's a full-on bigot and anti-progressive in any way. And ironically, he has more in common with the actual neo-Nazis than he does actual black leftists or liberals that actually want to see racial progressivism through socialism or even I don't understand, but capitalism, like a lot of black liberals would want to have. So I think with that preempting, we can get into this video. It's only 15 minutes long. I'm gonna be playing at 1.25 speed, so it shouldn't take that long. But I think that yeah, there is ways to healthily discuss people that are overzealously correcting or compensating for racial bias or the racism that black people deal with, and they wind up coming out the end of it being very ignorant and segregationist. But they're ironically a minority.
or whatever, would you want to be in it skateboarding? And he was like, oh wow, yeah, that'd be.
He brought up my favorite sport. I've been skateboarding for 10 years. Let's see what Tim Pool, the poser, has to say about skateboarding. I'll never let him live that shit down because one thing that'll always weird me out about Tim Pool and him being a white supremacist conspiracy theorist is that how are you a skateboarder but you're a white supremacist conspiracy theorist? Because skateboarding at its origins and stuff was a sport popularized by the not necessarily all, but of course in the 80s by the punks and mods and even some of the like the black hip hop kids, like the very first generation. But in the 90s, it was still punks, the hip hop kids, street kids, and street punks, and stuff like that. Hippies, at least left wing hippies and stuff like that, and hipsters are the people that are known for skateboarding. Are people with that, number one, are poor, work for a living, might come from troubled homes, and that are usually very progressive people. Because I feel like punk rock, and skateboarding has an indisputable relationship, the same with skateboarding and hip hop, in the way that which I don't understand how can you be a skateboarder, you wind up, around all these different demographics of people, you hear all these different stories after you meet so many different kinds of people, and you come out the other end of the experience of being a skateboarder as a white supremacist. And it's like, like, for instance, like, one thing that always weirded me out is how you're a skateboarder, but you're a pro cop. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all cops are like bitches and skateboarders, but if you get kicked out of a spot sometimes, you got cops that are overdoing it. Even when you're an adult, even when you're a kid, probably more often. You got cops that are cussing you out, cops that are trying to give you tickets. And I'm not talking about for shit that you obviously shouldn't do, like hopping fences where it say no trespassing. That's a risk that you're personally deciding to think. But if you're like skateboarding on public property or something like that, and the cops are called on you, often at the time, the police overdo what they have to do. And shit, look at the story of Love Park, for instance. This is a whole thing with me where, and it's like, don't get me wrong, it's not all skateboarders and it's not the entire skateboarder community, it's not all the companies and shit like that. And I'm sure that, the punk rock and hip hop movement still has very strong roots in skateboarding. But at the end of the day, it seems to be some weird thing where you have a lot of skateboarders that are like woking themselves into fascism, ironically enough.
Oh, you're white? Sorry, we're not interested. I'll tell you a quick story. We had a pro skateboarder on this show a few months ago. He was a gay man, and he's like, it's not really a big deal. He's like, I don't go around telling everybody, but he got approached by a friend who said, hey, they're doing a commercial for, I think it was a shoe company, and it's like Pride Month or whatever.
I remember this, and I don't think that really ever even happened. Nobody. It's like if I completely dispute and doubt these stories, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because when Tim Pool is a grifter white supremacist, and you got a lot of people, regardless of them having proximity to people of color or being gay or whatever, who are also grifting, and they're willing to make apologia or inferences for the defense of white supremacy. So you can basically go on this podcast or get on the internet and literally say anything. You can say anything on here. It doesn't have to be true. So when you say these things, about, I went up to the Supreme store and tried to apply to be a model, and they said, get out of here, white boy. Anybody can say any of these, any of these incidents can be completely made up or taken out of context in a vacuum and stuff like that, in order for people to profit or gain clout off trying to play defense for white supremacy and play defense for the false persecution that white people claim, a lot of racist white people claim to feel.
Or would you want to be in it skateboarding? And he was like, oh wow, yeah, that'd be cool. And when they submitted his reel, the people running the commercial said, why did you send us a white guy? So here is a gay man.
And I'm 100% sure that they didn't say that. That, at the end of the day, that, oh, we don't want white people in our reel for skateboarding and diversity and whatever the fuck have you. Maybe and it's like if he didn't get featured and stuff like that, because you got a lot of gay dudes that can come off as like just regular straight white guys, right? And then maybe for this magazine, I don't even think it because he was white. Maybe they were looking for somebody more queer presenting, and I think that's probably why he didn't get featured in the magazine. Because especially in skateboarding, is a very masculine hobby. Even a lot of the women that skateboard, have a very tomboyish way of going about it. So even gay skateboarders, like gay men skateboarders, ain't gonna necessarily be dressed queer. So when he probably went to the publication, they were probably just like, this isn't really what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody who's more out there. I don't think that in any circumstance, unless it was a magazine or they were looking for photos and videos of just straight up people of color, like if they said it was a black only thing, and that shit happens sometimes, and it's not as harmful as somebody saying whites only for a myriad of reasons, like white people don't face institutional discriminations and removed from opportunities for being white, but black people have. But that's a whole other subject. I just really doubt the veracity of this story because it's so many people out here who have so much motivated reasoning to just make shit up and get on the internet and say that it happened. Like I can literally get on my channel right here and just be like well, yesterday when I was at work, the boss came in and gave me an opportunity. I moved up in the plant, and he said that we were just giving these opportunities to black guys only. But I was like, this white guy's been working here 15 years, and I just feel so bad for all the white guys that have been working here longer. I shouldn't get a promotion just because I'm black. You see what I'm saying? You can, if you know the language of conservatism and apologizing for, all bigotries, but right now we're talking about white supremacy. You can come up and make up a story about anything.
For their diversity commercial, and they said white person, and then we played the commercial, no white people in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've actually hit on a really important insight.
And I mean, if the commercial was supposed to be looking for diversity and stuff like that, like as in they were looking for people of color or people who are queer presenting, and he just did not fit the build of what they were looking for, because you can look for these things and it's not inherently harmful unless you, like I said, unless you can refer to my statements previously. It's like because being white at the end of the day is not holding you back from opportunities. It was just one magazine that this guy didn't get in, and we cannot account this for being like, oh, this is the end of the world for white people. They can't get opportunities. They can't do anything. They're not allowed to do this, that, or the other. Because at the end of the day, white people are still afforded, more opportunities for the simple fact of, where they were born and shit like that. But I'm not trying to say too much because because the thing that's bad about this subject matter about quote unquote this guy being discriminated against, but he wasn't really discriminated against. He probably just wasn't chosen, for this part, because ironically these people would turn around when black people sometimes, especially black people, but I'm sure Hispanic and Arab people too, can find stories where they didn't get a job or modeling opportunities simply because they were black or Arab or Hispanic or sometimes Asian. But those stories are invalid in that and then they will like literally say like, black people, the positions of power and opportunities that we didn't earn. While saying that, I don't know, bro. It's weird. I don't understand why.
That a lot of people miss, and in fact, even people who've written on this issue miss. And an area where I differ a little bit from other folks who've written very good books in a slightly similar areas, guys like Christopher Caldwell and Richard Nanania, kind of written books about this, is that I don't think the Civil Rights Act in and of itself is the totalizing thing that gets.
And right here we have a motherfucking Nazi, because this is why when Emma Vigeland came on Tim Pool and she debated him, one of the very few leftists that were able to come on the show and push back against a lot of his fucking conspiracy theories and white supremacist garbage. This is a show for Nazis, because if you have anybody that's questioning the veracity and the validity of the Civil Rights Act, you can just automatically assume that they're a Nazi, they're a white supremacist, they're a bad person. Because there's nobody that's, you know, you will notice nobody in the mainstream is stupid enough to go back and question a landmark piece of legislation that freed, you know, millions of people from the bondage of Jim Crow laws and discrimination in many different ways. And it also came with other acts such as the Voting Rights Act and what have you. But at the end, which they're trying to repeal too, because these people, you know, are the white supremacists. They are the hateful people. But it's like I said in that one video with the Asian guy narrating it, who was probably put up to that shit by Nazis on 4chan, that racism and white supremacist talking points these days, and I'm sure this guy's gonna get into it with his fat ass, is sold as victimhood. Nobody's gonna come out and just say that they don't like this race or that race, and that they think this race or that about this race. You would occasionally have that, maybe like on D Live or some shit like that, or 4chan. But for the most part, here on YouTube and other mainstream platforms and stuff, oh yeah, Twitter, you can say you don't like other races. I'm sure you won't get in trouble. But my point being is that most people don't sell white supremacy as saying that white people are superior and that they hate other races of people. They will come forth like talking about you know, things that are caused by inequality, like, you know, the criminality of black people, or immigration, and, you know, then they will promote a bunch of like, you know, fake populism about how the white working class is being harmed by immigrants and stuff like that. What I'm basically getting at is that white supremacy today is not sold as direct hatred, even though it still is the same direct hatred. It's sold as victimhood. White people always have to be the victim of some legislation. White people are the victim of some social system. White people are the victim of social expectations. Even if those social expectations are simply just being a decent human being. You know, just don't say slurs. Treat everybody with respect. Don't joke about certain things, you know. Like, these are the same motherfuckers that think that you should be able to go out in like a Klan's robe and think that everybody is just supposed to laugh at it.
Us to where we are now, and that, as you point out, these laws are on the books and they're just getting ignored.
Right.
It's in the culture, this type of discrimination, and it really helps me have folks like Alliance who will actually call this out on lawsuits. But right now, a lot of this discrimination is illegal and it's been happening in plain sight.
Yeah,
Right?
I think that's totally right.
See what I'm saying? Such victims of nothing. Keep in mind, as we go throughout this entire video, white people hold most of the socio-economic and political power in the United States. Even if you want to say leftists and you know, liberal politicians and people that are like sort of figureheads and leaders of leftists and left-wing causes and stuff like that. People who are you know, like for instance, like the Democrat Party is thought of as being somewhat tangible allies to black people. Most Democrats are still white. People that hold most of the wealth in America are white. People that control most of the opportunities, who gets a record deal, and who even like, you know, even like things like, you know, acting studios where black people do get opportunities, you know, in music labels and stuff like that, is white people. White people still, again, hold most of the socioeconomic and political power in America, and they're not going to lose it anytime soon. If we compare the numbers of black wealth versus white wealth, black wealth does not even compare to the amount of wealth that's been saved and privatized to the back by white people, because they've had financial, institutional, and political favor for most of this country's history, if not all of it, to be honest with you. So, you know, and at 1 minute 48 seconds in this video, that's the argument that you make against people like this when they saying shit like, oh well, and on a college campus 2 years ago, I walked in the cafeteria and I sat down at this table, you know, and I started eating, and this group of football players had told me to get away from here, white boy. So that means that all social justice movements are racist, and that white people are being discriminated against because I couldn't sit at this lunch table. When again, keep in mind, white people hold most of the socioeconomic and political power in the United States. In the Western world, arguably, depending on what you view as white. But, you know, whatever.
How did this happen? I'm not sure. It all happened kind of under the radar. There was a lot of push for years, and then DEI, I think, put it on steroids as far as this kind of racialized view of the world.
Oh, there's their new N word. Here we go.
My racial group has to win and yours has to lose. But a lot of big business.
Yeah, here we go. A lot of hyperbolic language and stuff like that, because the thing about being into social justice and talking about especially racial equality is not about tearing down white people. I guess it's like a lot of people say, I don't usually say this, but white supremacy is when, when you become a white supremacist, when equality is viewed as oppression. And it's like, I don't know how many times I'm going to have to say it, but, wanting black people to have the same opportunities and socioeconomic and political power as white people is not trying to tear down or take away things from white people. Black people and other races that live in this country are just trying to get opportunities to build their own intergenerational wealth and get access to education and decent jobs and actually make something of themselves. And that has nothing to do with taking anything from white people. We just need better political policies and economic policies that, ironically enough, you want to know the most ironic part about this before I press play, is that a lot of the backwards and stupid social and especially economic political policies that we have hurt working class white people, but a lot of white people will vote for these policies anyway because they're racist and they believe that black people are benefiting off free health care and welfare benefits. So I digress, is that when we make better social and economic policies for especially the United States of America, but I'm sure other countries can relate to this too, it's a rising tide that raises all ships. At the end of the day, it's why Martin Luther King or Fred Hampton and most black leftists, Angela Davis, were not just working with black people and talking about black civil rights, even though they deeply cared about it. But at the end of the day, they were very intersectional, understood that the race issue was also a class issue. So there's nonsense where people are just saying like, racial justice and equality is about taking away from white people. It's not, when at the end of the day, at least in my opinion, it's just a pillar of class warfare. And it'll be in everybody's best interest to work together against the white supremacists, the fascists, and the rich capitalists who are trying to deprive us of, both basic human rights and economic freedom. And that's from the horse's mouth. Like, I call myself a black leftist, I'm a black socialist, and I don't believe in, separating from white people or tearing down white people in order to so-called benefit black people. That's a really stupid thing for people to say. And most and it's like most political policies that were written to address these grievances, like affirmative action, companies coming up with diversity quotas and stuff like that, were sometimes used to actually address these issues, like with college admissions and stuff like that. But companies come up with this because it's good for PR, and then they realize that from a factual standpoint, having a more diverse workforce helps you helps you innovate more, helps with communication, helps with things like advertisements and stuff like that. So companies at the end of the day have their own ways that they benefit, because ironically enough, racism and it hurts everybody. It hurts the white working class, it hurts corporations, it hurts everybody. Racism, racist policies, and barring people of color out of opportunities, and both the business and in the educational field, makes the world not only a lot harder for people of color to navigate through, but it makes the world less productive. And at the end of the day, again, like I said, keep in mind that things like not having access to college because you were born making your parents made too little, or having to our welfare policies and stuff like that, our wages, and things like right to work laws and stuff like that, which I talk about a lot. This these laws that are meant to hold back and hurt black people also hurt working class white people. That even goes to include the drug war. There's a lot of working class and poor white people that have had their lives fucked up because these clauses and these amendments that were meant to hold back and hurt black people also have a cascading effect that hurts white people. So You know, racial justice, again, at 2 minutes and 5 seconds in this video, is not about taking away from white people. When we fix a lot of the socioeconomic problems in this country, it'll be a rising tide that raises all ships. It's not, again, about taking anything from white people.
Institutions and college and university setting as well adopted these things, and nobody challenged them legally. But it is starting to change. Some of the Harvard decision from the Supreme Court was kind of the first real shot across the bow. But that's not a limited decision. I think it's going to result in a lot of these programs, which really are patently
that was actually really
and
sad.
ultimately undermine the core promise of.
Because what's also ironic about affirmative action programs, I'm gonna speed this up a little bit because I can't take all day doing this video. I really don't want to. Is that we take it to 125, but at the end of the day, the people that benefited the most from affirmative action programs, were white women and not black people. You know, this idea that black people are just bowling into colleges and taking opportunities from white people is simply just not true.
The U.S. experiment, which is we're all equal before the law, regardless of our race, regardless of our sex, regardless of our religious convictions. And so I think in the end, we're going to be, the arc is
they so backhanded with their racism today.
It's absolutely contrary to our founding
See the victimhood
protections and some existing laws and statutes as well.
Well, I see two paths on this road we're on, and I'm hoping we win. I think a strong component of it would require a Donald Trump victory and a Republican victory in November.
Yeah, which isn't going to happen probably. And at the end of the day, the thing about being a fascist, being a white supremacist, no matter if you try to sell it as direct hatred and grievance against people of color, or if you try to sell it as victimhood, white supremacy is a losing ideology. As people especially become more class conscious and wake up to the fact that black people and people of color are just people like them, as information about the struggles of people of color become more readily available in education and stuff like that, and as, you know, ironically enough, capitalism, you know, helps at times spread this information, like, you know, YouTube channels, you can find a million documentaries about racial justice and stuff like that. And as society culturally gets more integrated with one another through things like, you know, the gaming industry, or simple shit like love and anime and stuff like that, it becomes harder to sell white supremacy to everybody, including white people, when they are having a lot of crossover experiences with the people that they're taught to hate.
Considering the stakes of this election, but I feel that if I would
check
predict,
on something real quick,
if we were to see a Democrat victory, you're likely going to see the expansion of this as what is written down in law is completely meaningless. You know, people point out, Donald Trump just got convicted in a court of law. It's a jury, they agreed, and it's like, well, yes, in the Soviet Union they had trials as well. No one takes them seriously. When we're looking at corporations that are outright telling
false
people
equivalency, what a shitty comparison that was. Like, first of all, Donald Trump got convicted of crimes that the shit he literally did. He falsified his financial records in order to pay off an adult film actress, and he hid information that could have changed Americans' opinions about him during the election. He which is, you know, election interference, and is it's a financial crime. It's falsifying his business documents. Not to mention, I think it was something about this about him overestimating the values of his properties and stuff like that as well. So at the end of the day, you know, Trump got prosecuted for things that he actually did. And what's ironic again about when these people say this, because there's so many people out there, especially people of color, who have been prosecuted for things that they didn't do, or were like railroaded in trials that they were unfair in. Because I would like to see if Tim Pool, and it's like, I hate to bring this up, can go back in time and see the Central Park 5, what type of videos would he make? Well, I guess I already know that from the Ahmaud Arbery video, where he was talking about this guy, you know, was guilty. He was stealing out of a construction site. It was self-defense. He didn't do anything. These guys should get off. It's not fair. So at the end of the day, these people can see, you know, they can't see that Trump actually committed crimes and get the prosecution that he deserves. But every single time a black person, you know, is taken out, or put in prison for things that they provably didn't do, whether it's in a time being or later, then that's completely legitimate. Got it.
This happened to me, actually.
Oh boy.
Sort of. So I was I worked for a
Sort
company called
of.
Fusion. They were hosting a big event with presidential candidates. I was one of their top paid
Wait a
correspondents.
minute. Are you white or Asian? I remember the last time when he had an argument. I think he's arguing with Ari the Rugged Man or somebody, and he was like, "I'm not white. I'm Asian. No, I'm not white. I'm Asian. I'm Asian. I'm an Asian person. I'm colored." No, and it's like at the end of the day, Tim Pool is mixed, and he has the appearance of a white man. Clearly.
I am also a mixed race person, and news went out about the event they were doing and the hosts they had brought on to do it, and it was their top correspondents plus one outside contractor who was black. And so I'm like, hey man, look, you don't gotta come and ask me to do anything. Let me do my thing, pay me my money. But I did ask the president of the company. I was like, couldn't help but notice you brought in all of the top paid correspondents, and then a contractor, and then I'm not invited. And he said, you look too white. Just straight up said, you look too white. And I was like, well, I'm a mixed race person.
I can guarantee you that this didn't happen either. Because, like I said, keep in mind on these podcasts, again, you can literally get on YouTube or any other social media platform and say anything, whether it's true or not.
And he was like, yeah, but that doesn't matter.
Because I doubt that somebody will actually get in somebody's face and tell you that you don't want the job because you're white. Because at the end of the day, how racial discrimination works. For instance, if you're black and you don't get hired at a job because you're black, you don't get told that you're not getting hired because you're black. It's gonna be other reasons. They'll tell you that call you later and don't call you back. They'll tell you that you're just not what we're looking for. No business at all, like their HR department, is gonna get up in somebody's face and just say, we're not hiring you because of you're this race or that race or this gender or whatever. That doesn't happen because corporations are stupid. Because if a corporation literally comes to you and tells you that they're not going to give you an opportunity or they're not going to hire you because you're white, they're bound for a lawsuit. You can sue them for that, for like hundreds of thousands of dollars, for telling you that you can't have an opportunity because what race you are, or they're not going to hire you because of what race you are. That's an instant, easy lawsuit, easy violation of the Civil Rights Act, especially if you in any way have it written out or recorded.
I was like, all right, well, this was straight up with me. And they paid me a lot of money, so I was like, honestly, like, I'm if it was something I was pursuing, like I had applied for it,
right,
I probably would have lost my mind.
Well, it's interesting, Tim, and I think your experience is really similar. And I was one of the first interviews I did about this book with this Charlie Kirk, and Charlie, I thought, had something really interesting to say.
Another white supremacist.
He talks to such a broad swath of people in the conservative movement. He says, when I talk with my older donors and folks like that, and they say, I start talking about anti-white racism, they kind of freak out. They're like, oh, can we even say that? Is that bad? Does that make us racist? Whereas when I go on college campuses and I talk to young people,
because anti-white racism is even for conservative donors, anti-white racism usually is a saying by not just like middle of the road conservatives. This is a neo-Nazi talking point now. So that's why even conservative donors don't want him to touch this subject matter.
About this, like young white people, they're like, yeah, this is the biggest issue we're facing. Thank you so much for raising it. So I think there's also a generation gap here where a lot of old people or older.
No, younger generation of people are actually more racially progressive, and it's really older white people who are the ones that are racist and have their racial biases and stuff. Not saying that it's all older white people that are like over 40 and shit, and that you can't be racist if you're like between 17 and 25 or something like that. But I really doubt that you go to a college campus because on college campuses you got a couple of kinds of people. Well, really only two when it comes to racism. But I feel like most people on college campuses are principally anti-racist because you're exposed to a more diverse pool of people anyway. So you have experiences with different races of people. So experiencing life and living with other races of people can help break down those stereotypes and stuff that you may have, in biases that you may have held before. But a lot of people that go to college anyway are already anti-racist, leftists and stuff like that, socialists, liberals, anarchists from time to time and stuff like that. So I really doubt that you have young white, even the young white kids on college campuses are praising you for repeating a known neo-Nazi talking point. And you think I'm bad on my channel, they won't even like entertain or talk to you about like dumb trivial shit like this because they feel that they're above, discussing such. And at the end of the day, an asinine subject is a really stupid subject.
For people, even people like me or middle-aged, my generation, don't understand how bad it's gotten for younger people trying to make their way in the world right now on some of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, are you guys seeing more and more lawsuits or more and more requests for lawsuits?
Fuck.
There are more lawsuits being filed on the overreach of DEI now than there ever has been. I think the floodgates really.
What does this mean, the overreach of DEI, like corporate DEI programs? I don't understand. So do you think that that there's some sort of government policy that says, and it's like, I hate this shit, bro, because all conservatives and white supremacists would do this, but I repeat myself. They think that, okay, you go up to a job interview, right, and you're a white guy, you're dressed in like a nice sweater vest, and you got your shirt tucked in and your pants pulled up, and you got your Mr. Rogers dress shoes on. You walk in the interview, you kill it, you talk, to everybody, you got all these credentials and shit, and you walk on everybody and say, we'll stay in touch. And then they think they're like a black person with like, nappy hair, freaking, big ass shirt on, some Jordans or whatever, with no credentials. They walk in there. So what qualifies you for this position? They think that the black person just like goes in there and talks about, I don't know, them doing drugs or some shit like that. And then they were like, so, well, our company does have a diversity quota. Even though this black person isn't qualified, we're going to hire him to hit a diversity quota, and we're not going to hire the more qualified white person. And keep in mind that more white people still take up not only is it more white people that are business owners, more white people are in politics and on political strategist teams. More white people hold positions of power in corporations, such as supervisory roles, in the finance department, HR, and whatever too. So this is some shit that I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. I really don't. Because at the end of the day, also, you can't say that white people are poor, distressed, and drawn out, but black people are trying to take stuff from them. Because what would we be taking at the end of the day? Are white people these super smart warriors from the Goyim that are, taking it as they live and enjoying the blood, sweat, and tears of capitalism? Or are white people these poor, defenseless nymphs that black people are trying to take advantage of and take everything from? And by saying black people, I mean people of color in general. Like Arab people, Hispanic people that come here for opportunities too. You cannot believe both of these things at once. That white people are in some way or another superior and getting the opportunities that they deserve it, while also saying that the inferior people are taking taking things away from weak, defenseless white people that are being legislated against. That makes no sense to me.
Opened with the Harvard decision from the Supreme Court.
Enemy is strong and weak at the same time.
And so, I was just looking at an opinion the other day, coming out of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, where a program that has race preferences built into financial awards, the court said this violates federal law against race-based contracting decisions. Another decision came out recently that struck down a federal program and the racial preferences they have for minority-owned businesses. And so basically, if you fell into certain racial categories or ethnic categories.
At the end of the day, I feel like this is similar to the giving back farmers compensation for being discriminated against from the federal government not filing, I believe it was like, contracts with black farmers and stuff like that. They're not doing this because they have a principled belief in true equity. They're doing this because they're racist and they hate black people. They like to see things taken away from black people, so they will even waste their money and time. Imagine, because it's like they say that they're quote-unquote anti-racist. Imagine being this racist that you will literally sit back and take the time to spend money to legally go challenge, legislation and laws passed to help disadvantaged black people, and you're so fucking racist. You're so mad that black people are getting sort of a foot up and a little bit of help in society, that you go behind the pasture of these laws to try to get them overturned. You have to be a really insanely racist, insanely committed person. Because keep in mind, to challenge these laws and to go to the courtroom and stuff like that, you got to travel across the country possibly, unless you're living in Washington D.C. But Washington D.C. is so heavily Democrat. I'm not even really sure if you have too many of these kind of people there. Not to say that there aren't any, because hey, most of the Republican congressional people probably in some way or another live in Washington. My point being is that it takes a real commitment to white supremacy to actually want to travel across the country and challenge legislation and laws, whether they're new or old, that helps people of color or women or gay people, because you have that much hatred in you. And they put in this fake coat of paint of, oh, we're just challenging it because we want everything to be equal, is very, very, very see through. And it's like I can't really, because as a black person, and I'm not saying it like that, but it's just like sometimes when you see racism like that, you really at a loss for words. Like, you only thing you can really say, like, wow, you're a piece of shit. And I think that I don't really have a lot to say about it, because I think, the ignorance here speaks for itself.
You got favored preferential treatment under the program. And they said that just violates the fundamental principle of equal protection for the law. So I do think that a lot of this stuff exists. It's pervasive. But I also think the legal decisions are going to go the right way. They're going to stack pretty quickly. You were saying before, Tim, about the things that are written are ignored in many ways. But what we're worried about is what's happening behind the scenes, what's shrouded. And one of the things we're working on is the way in which the federal government is taking kind of the secrecy that's allowed within the banking system and using it and weaponizing that against people.
Huh?
Totally legal businesses, weaponizing it against people for their constitutionally protected activities like speech and religion.
What do you mean?
There's a lot coming out on this. I testified at Congress on this a few months ago, where we were actually caught up in it as well, ADF, where I work, Alliance Defending Freedom, because the FinCEN, part of the counterterrorism kind of ecosystem at the federal level, shared a document with big banks saying, look, around the January 6th, activities, we want you to look for people who could be domestic violent terrorists. And they said, here's a list of hate groups, so-called hate groups, which is put out by all these far-left activists. We're on it. Lots of other Christian organizations are as well.
Yeah, I see. I was looking for the conspiracism in this. I had to let him talk a little bit longer to understand what he was saying. But first of all, the federal government and the governments of the states and city will do what's necessary to protect its citizens. It's just, sadly enough, a lot of the people that you're defending and that you feel sorry for are terrorists. Simple as that. White supremacists are often at the time terrorists. They commit terror attacks. And what they do, and it sounds like what they did, is they instruct banks to look for people that are investing in certain organizations, and people that are buying possibly certain merchandise and what have you, to commit acts of terror. So people that are building, like, I'm assuming, at the most large and extreme level, arsenals and weaponry, or people that are donating money and funds to actual hate in, like, white supremacist groups, which is a bad thing, because these people should be on the list, because at the end of the day, I put it like this: the difference between left-wing activism and so-called right-wing activism. Left-wing activism is about equality, freedom, liberation, and peace, while right-wing activism, even with this false progressive coat of paint over it, is inherently violent, and it's about discussing taking the rights away from other people and returning to a tradition of a certain demographic of people being under another, whether we're talking poor people being under the rich, or black people and people of color being under the white people, or gay people being under heterosexual people. And right-wing extremism especially intentionally builds violence. Not to mention the fact, I can argue that this entire video right here is arguing for political violence, because it's providing a false narrative for white people, especially white people that might already be leaning to the racist side, to feel persecuted. And at the end of the day, when you feel like you're being persecuted, nothing's going to change, nothing's going to get better. The government's against everybody. The government's trying to, out to get you. What's the inevitable conclusion to that? Is political violence.
And they're like, these organizations are domestic violent extremists, or at least could be, and people who donate to them could be. And they're asking big banks to scour their records for people who give donations to groups like us, who use terms like MAGA or Trump, or shop at Dick's Sporting Goods or Cabela's. Like, these are.
I really don't think it's just people that buy, like, Make America Great Again hats and, like, support Trump, or buy, like, a rifle from Dick's Sporting Goods, or have, like, F-150s and stuff like that. I don't think those are the people that they're looking for. They are, and it's like, at the end of the day, it's like I said, it's like activist groups such as yours, the name of the game is the political violence, is the violence. So I really don't understand this weird, like, this like victimhood dichotomy where you are, and it's like, because like at the end of the day, I don't explain how victimhood is the selling point of white supremacy today. And like, white people, racist white people at least, aren't going to come out and just say that they hate a certain minority of people. Everybody is not like 5 or 6 years old. We're not 15. We're past this step of the narrative in decoding how white supremacists use their language for recruitment. I'm sure the FBI is past that too. I think that they are. So nobody here is going to act stupid with you. Your organization is most likely a white supremacist organization. Because if you're literally up here trying to challenge the Civil Rights Act, you're literally trying to challenge laws passed to help and assist and uplift people of color on like with heavily motivated reasoning basis, you're probably a white supremacist organization. And like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of Venn diagram as a circle when it comes to being a Trump supporter and being a white supremacist, but not all Trump supporters are white supremacists and terrorists. And I think it's fucked up that you try to put everybody in one box to make everybody think that they're some perpetual victim of some invisible system out here to get them.
This is really alarming stuff. So it's a whole government problem. Yeah. And there's a lot of manipulation of the kind of legal apparatus, especially the counterterrorism and criminal divisions in the federal government, to harm people's First Amendment.
Not to mention the fact that to harm people's First Amendment right. We'll get to that in a second. But first of all, man, the reason why y'all are being so heavily investigated and stuff like that, it doesn't come in a vacuum. Keep in mind, for the past 6 or 7 years, okay, so like I grew up after 9/11, right? And we were not after 9/11. I was alive during it, and I wasn't alive during like the USS Cole bombing and stuff like that, or the World Trade Center bombing. But we were weathering a storm of Islamic extremism terrorism, which is ironically right wing when you think about it. But we're going to separate white supremacist terrorism from Islamic extremism for the purposes of this video. But okay, that was the wave of terrorism that we were weathering, back in the 90s to 2000s, and even technically the early 2010s with that one thing that happened in France in 2011. But after Trump started campaigning, and especially when he got into office, hate group activity exploded. Hate group activity, both on the internet and in-person recruiting, went up. Many people became independent agents looking at message boards and YouTube videos for recruitment and the purposes of promoting their propaganda or getting their doses of propaganda. And this, of course, led to a lot of people acting on this propaganda, which led to a lot of terror attacks. Like, I believe like the one shooting where it happened at the gay club. I believe that was last year. I think it was in Colorado. Yeah, it's in Colorado. Was it in Brooklyn, New York? Like the one shooting where that guy went in there and he was like, literally he went into a supermarket that was like 50 miles or so away from his house to try to attack all those black people. There was the one with Dylan Roof and stuff like that, and the guy went to like a black church and targeted people that were worshiping God and targeted people that were just in religious practices, unarmed, not expecting any threats of violence. There was the guy that watched Tim Pool, the dude that did the shooting in Allen, Texas. So we have been weathering a storm of white supremacist stochastic terrorism. And we can talk about the Charlottesville neo-Nazi rally. The whole event to me was an act of terror, and then you had James Alex Field, who crashed his car into a group of counter protesters. One, of course, didn't make it through, and she died. My point being is that I can name incidents of white supremacist terrorist attacks causing actual harm, like right-wing violence is actually harming people. It's not just people getting milkshaked. It's not just you getting your ass beat for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. White supremacy, again, is inherently violent. And people that follow your organization and many other organizations, or even people that simply watch Tim Pool, it's done come out that they are, wound up being terrorists.
rights. And so that's a real concern. I think it's all part of the same package.
Yeah, and I think maybe part of the reason I'm a little less optimistic, and I mean, if I were totally pessimistic, I wouldn't have written the book, because I think there are things we can do. But I'm a little less optimistic because I think a lot of these things that we're doing to challenge the law are only as good as the people we have who are enforcing them. And so by that, what do I mean?
You see what I'm saying? This type of language right here inherently like advises violence, because it's like this, is what pretty much all white supremacists do. Is that okay? We can challenge these things in the law, because keep in mind, when left wing and liberal activists want to challenge, different social problems and stuff like that, they say that, oh, you should just debate it, you should discuss it, you should challenge it in the law and all this other shit. But they don't hold that same standard to themselves. Even though, in America is socio-politically tilted to suit and benefit white people to the maximum, basically, they still argue that there's people in the government and people in the system that's against white people.
The Harvard Supreme Court decision, which says affirmative action is illegal in universities. So Missouri has a really excellent forward-looking attorney general. As soon as that happens, he cancels $16 million worth of race-based scholarships in the state. But I don't think any other state AG did it, right? Because nobody actually stepped forward and said, "Aha, I'm going to go use this." And then
it's called being racist. It's not. I think the worst part about this interview is that he's trying to pass this off as this progressivism of keeping things equal, when clearly if black people are getting these grants and they're getting these opportunities, other minorities are getting these opportunities, there's because there is an inequity. Like, most people that go to college are white. Most people that hold degrees in educational attainment are white. Most people that hold higher positions of power in corporations and businesses are white. So there is a problem with black people and people of color not getting the opportunities necessary for us to build and make sure that we can even properly participate in capitalism.
Kind of real black pill, if you will, is to look at California. So California has now twice at the ballot box outlawed affirmative action by race in its universities. If you look at the statistics for admission, if you really squint, you can maybe see a little bit of effect that outlawing has had,
right?
But it ain't much.
This was that was funny. So this you're referring to.
I think it's still more white people going and getting into college than black people, even in California. You see what I'm saying about this shit? Because they're acting like the Beverly Hills well-to-do white kid who, would never touch a skateboard, who's on an up and up, only listens to show tunes and jazz, and has that white supremacist picket fence way of living, is getting discriminated against. And then all the kids from like South Central and Compton and stuff like that are getting all the college admission opportunities and stuff like that. When clearly, if you look at any city in America, and I think you can apply this standard to America, but I'm sure you can apply it to Detroit. White kids go on to go to college and get higher education, while most young black kids and other people of color, like Hispanic and Arab people, get jobs, just like regular jobs. Not to say there are no black people who go to college and there's no black people in positions of power, but at the end of the day, it's clear, because you ask, a lot of white people and stuff like that, what do they do for a living? It's like, some corporate shit, or they got like a degree. Oh, I'm a nurse, I'm a doctor. Oh, I'm an architect. I do, like shit that you get salaries for. Or I'm an artist. But you ask your average black person, what do they do? I work at a factory. I'm a truck driver. Not to say there's not white people that don't have these jobs, but I'm saying for the most part, black people have more manual labor and less institutionalized jobs than white people do.
I think this was 4 or 5 years ago. They had an attempt to amend the Constitution of California to allow them to discriminate on the basis of race,
right,
in public contracting and education.
Yeah.
I remember I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's like, like a woke LA actress, and I saw that she had posted in favor of it, and so I immediately texted her and gave her a phone call, and I was like, so why do you think people should be allowed to discriminate against people based on their race? And she was like, well, no, this is to help minorities. And I said, what's like the population?
I hate that dude, that bike, bro.
Should break down California. Like, what are the racial demographics? Let's pull this one up.
I think,
because at the end of the day, this still doesn't matter. I guess I could end this video here, Well, at the end of the day, man, even though anecdotally sometimes you might see cases of people overcorrecting and being sort of discriminatory towards white people, keep in mind that white people still hold most of the socioeconomic and political power in the United States and are always afforded more opportunities both in business and education than people of color. So there's no reason to walk around at all just thinking just even a little bit, because like these are like literally people. It's like the caricature I built earlier in this video. They think that the guy that sits at home and smokes weed all day and live off their wife, stereotypical like quote unquote black hoodlum is just getting all the jobs and opportunities, when the well-to-do picket fence white boys getting discriminated against. But if you look at the demographics of people in corporate jobs and in education, this is clearly not the case. Y'all have a wonderful day.